Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for February 1st, 2023. We are in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 2, and verse 1. Let's hear from the word of the Lord. In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" he asked. The Lord said, "Go up." David asked, "Where shall I go?" "To Hebron," the Lord answered. So David went up there with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. The big picture here is David is living in Ziklag. He is still continuing to be a loyal citizen of the Philistines, at least on the surface. They've rebuilt Ziklag. He is still continuing to control his territory that was given to him. But he's missing home. And he wants to go back home. He calls the priest and ephod in. He inquires of the Lord. The Lord tells him to go back home. He asks where to go. He's thinking a town, and the Lord sends him back to Hebron. Hebron is not one of the places he's ever lived before. It's a walled city. It has towns that are around it, they're associated with it, and the Lord sends him back there. At that point in time, it's the most important city in Judah. And so he goes back to the most important city in Judah, and he goes there to live. And when he gets there, the political leadership of the tribe of Judah have been talking, they've been thinking, they don't want to live under a Benjamite. They want to live under one of their own. And so they know that Samuel anointed him king. And he hasn't been king yet. And so they do the politics. All of them come together, and they come to where he's living, and they anoint him king over Judah. He's over one tribe. He's not over everybody. That's the big picture. Now, there's some details there that we missed, and I pointed out that he had been living in Ziklag for a while, and he continued to live there. And he continues to own Ziklag. His men still own property in Ziklag. They are going to defend their territory. And when he comes to be king of Judah, he still owns Ziklag. And apparently he keeps some men there to continue to possess his possession. We're going to come to that later. He also took two wives with him, the two wives we know about. And he's also turned his 600 men from a ragtag bunch of misfits that were debtors or unfit to live in their clans, or they got in political trouble with the king, to being responsible citizens. He's made them into an army. He did that before Ziklag. He's made them into farmers and responsible men, and they've brought their families with them, and they've become responsible husbands and fathers in Ziklag. And so when he comes back, he doesn't come back to Hebron and camp with his army in Hebron. He gets them dwellings and lands around Hebron and integrates them back in society. So he's acting very king-like. He and I'm sure some select men are with him in Hebron, but most of them are being back and integrating back in society. And they've come back with enough wealth that they can do that. So he's made them relatively wealthy men while they've lived in Ziklag. Second half of verse 4. When David was told that it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who had buried Saul, He sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead to say to them, "The Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Saul your master by bearing him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and brave, for Saul your master is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them." Jabesh Gilead is not in Judah. It's across the Jordan. I think it's in the tribe of Reuben, if I remember correctly. And they are nominally loyal to the house of Saul and the king that's been set up there, and we'll get to him in a moment. But, and they've done this great kindness, but they did it because he was king, not because the Benjamites are going to give them any particular honor. And they haven't been honored. David gives them that correct honor, thanks them for it. It's obvious to them that David was not trying to kill Saul. He wasn't out to harm Saul. He mourned him too. He appreciates the fact that they've risked their lives to honor Saul. And they've done him the proper honor. And David does them that honor. And he informs them that he's now king over Judah. They probably are going to stay loyal to their nominal king, but they're living across the Jordan from most of the country. They're already somewhat separated from the rest of the country. Their loyalty can be a lip loyalty. They can stay home and farm and, not do a whole lot and not pick sides between David and Saul's family. He's doing his politics with them, and he's doing it well. And David's just informing them that he, like Samuel had promised, is now anointed king. He's not asking them to come join him. He's not making any political demands on them. He's not going to tax them. He's not going to call them up to the army. He's just thanking them, appreciating what they did, and telling them to continue to be brave and loyal. Verse 8. Meanwhile, Abner the son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, and he made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, and Jezreel, and also over Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Now Abner, son of Ner was Saul's father, so Abner is Saul's brother. And he's a better general than Saul, and he became the general of the army. He knew how to organize men, how to lead them, how to motivate them. He knew how to get them supplies and make sure they were fairly distributed and keep them fed and clothed and housed on the battlefield, keep them in weapons, decide who is better at what weapon and put them in the right unit, and etc. He's done that. He has good battle strategy. And like most generals, he's had to do politics. Now, obviously, his brother's king, so he needs to do politics to support the family. And he's taken one of his nephews, the one that survived, and made him king. Because that's the only thing you can do. If he's not going to take the kingship away from his nephew, then putting Ishbosheth on the throne is the only thing he can do. It's the only son of Saul left. So he puts him on the throne, and he does his politics with the rest of Israel, and the rest of Israel, other than Judah, anoints him king. It's interesting that he took him out of Benjamite territory. He didn't leave him in Gilead. in uh, Gibeon, where Saul had been. He takes him over across the Jordan to one of the largest cities over there, in the most important city over there. And first the men over there anoint him king. And then eventually Benjamin recognizes his kingship, and then the rest of Israel. Ishbosheth is a very weak king. In truth, Abner, son of Ner, is the power behind the throne. Ishbosheth is just a figurehead. He hasn't sat in court with his father. He doesn't know how to make rule, how to rule correctly, how to do the politics of the kingdom. He's having to learn this. And he's inexperienced, and he has not been prepped for it. Saul never pictured him being king. He didn't see him having that kind of talent, and he had him out of the way. In fact, we get the idea he wasn't even an accomplished warrior, so Saul didn't even let him come onto the battlefield. He wasn't apparently a good administrator either. Abner, son of Ner, is the one that's doing all that and leaving Ishbosheth as the figurehead. Verse 10, Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. The house of Judah, however, followed David. The length of time David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So we see here, right here, there's a disparity. Ishbosheth lives 2 years as king. David is king in Judah for 6.5 years, or 7.5 years in Hebron. We're going to get to that in a few chapters, and that discrepancy. The next chapter is going to be dealing with the conflict between Ishbosheth and his men and David and his men. And apparently at the end of that, Ishbosheth is killed. Yeah, he's murdered. We're going to get that, but that's a different study. And he only lives 2 years. David continues to be king in Hebron, but does not end up being king over Israel for 5.5 more years after Ishbosheth dies. Part of that is simply they did not live in a society with instant communication, with quick communication. Saul had not set up information networks or mail system or anything like that. It took a while for the effects of Saul's death and then Ishbosheth's death to pass through the country, and for people to realize they needed David as king over the whole country. And it takes David a while to decide where he wants to rule the whole country, even when he thinks of himself as king over all of Israel. And so he just continues to stay where he is, and he rules basically Judah, but the rest of the country then, will eventually follow him. In one sense, it's politically settled in 2 years when Ishbosheth is killed, but it takes a while for everybody to come on board. And David does not force it. He has seen enough of civil war by the time Ishbosheth dies. He's willing to be patient. He is not an impatient man. He knows it's going to happen in God's timing. He sat and ran around the desert and preserved his own life instead of fighting Saul. He didn't attack Saul. He didn't kill Saul when he had him in the cave. He didn't kill Saul when he crept into camp and stole his water bottle and his spear. He could have ended it a whole lot sooner. But he was a patient man. He was going to be righteous. And even after Ishbosheth dies, he is righteous. He does not force people under his rule. He entices them to want to be under his rule. And that story is the next couple of chapters, and it's going to tell us a lot about David and his character. But this summary gets that to that, and we need to know that about David. Verse 12, Abner son of Ner, together with the men of Ishbosheth son of Saul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Joab son of Zerai and David's men went there and met them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat down on one side of the pool and the other group on the other side. Now the pool of Gibeon was a man-made pond, a man-made lake. Not all that big, but big enough that you could camp armies on either side. They could get water and without attacking each other. And they set up camp, and they start at first negotiating and eventually fighting. It was called a pool because it was man-made. They basically threw up a dam, an earthen dam, and got a lake built. There was no natural body of water there. This apparently was one of Saul's civil engineering works that he did to improve the countryside. And it preserved water, and they could water. They have found archaeological evidence of it, but it has eroded away and is no longer there. And we don't know when it was lost. This is the last mention we have of it, and it's kind of important. It was apparently not all that big of a lake, but it was a man-made lake. And since they did that, it's best to call it a pool. It's not it's a reservoir. It's man-made. It was there for drinking water, basically, in a dry country, and agricultural uses, and people drinking it, and their cattle drinking from it, and things like that. It was not there as a source of fish or anything like that. It wasn't that big. Verse 14, Then Abner said to Joab, Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us. All right, let them do it, Joab said. So they stood up and were counted off, 12 men for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 for David. And each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his dagger into his opponent's side, and they fell down together. So that place in Gibeon was called Helkath Hazarim. Now, Helkath Hazarim means field of daggers or field of hostilities. And it was named that because these 24 men that were going to have an exhibition fight, with the implied meaning that if one side won, that army would be the one that would win. Now, like Goliath's challenge to Israel, rarely did those exhibition fights, when somebody decisively won, automatically mean the losing side gave up. But like David killing Goliath, it sure shifted the psychology of the battle. And these 12 men from each side, they grapple, and when they get each other by the head, everybody stabs everybody in the side, kills their opponent, and in his turn is killed at the same moment, and all 24 of them die quickly. No, there's no winner. Everybody loses. And that starts the battle. It doesn't give a shift to the psychology. Everybody is mad and ready for battle. Theoretically, if one side, 12 of them had killed the other 12 and they had lived, then they would have, the losers would have surrendered. In reality, that never happened, as far as we can tell. Nobody ever surrendered because their heroes died. Generally, though, it did change the psychology of the battle. And as far as we can tell, every piece of evidence we've found all over the Middle East, when they had that before the battle started, uh, the side that won the preliminary battle tended to win that main battle. The Israelites won when Goliath was killed, etc. This is a devastating start to a battle. Neither side has a psychological advantage. Everybody is going to be hurt. Their best men have just died. They have gained nothing from it. It wasn't even entertaining. Everybody used guile and stealth, and everybody died. Verse 17. The battle that day was very fierce, and Abner and the men of Israel were defeated by David's men. The three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Ashiel. Now Ashiel was fleet-footed as a wild gazelle. He chased Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he pursued them. Abner looked behind him and said, Is that you, Ashiel? It is, he answered. Then Abner said to him, Turn aside to the right or the left, take on one of the young men and strip him of his weapons. But Ashiel would not stop chasing him. Again Abner warned Ashiel, Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face? But Ashiel refused to give up the pursuit, so Abner thrust the butt of his spear into Ashiel's stomach, and the spear came out through his back. He fell there and died on the spot, and every man stopped when he came to the place where Ashiel had fallen and died. So we have a little snippet of what battle was like. The three sons of Zeruiah. Zeruiah apparently was Jesse's brother. These are David's cousins. They're important generals, they're important soldiers. And the youngest of the three brothers is the one that can run fastest. And he has decided that he's going to chase down Joab, the leader of the army, the general of the army, and going to kill him. That's his self-appointed task. And Joab is running for his life. They know each other. They know each other by name. They know each other by sight. This is a civil war in which everybody knows everybody. You're killing neighbors. You're killing people you know on the battlefield. That's how brutal this is. And Ashiel is chasing Joab. He's got it in his mind he's going to kill Joab. He knows Joab is the power behind the throne, and if he hopes he can kill him and end the war, the guy that keeps Ishbosheth in power, if he dies, the country falls apart and David gets to be king. And he knows this. And that's probably how things would have worked. But Joab is actually a better warrior than that. And he's trying to dissuade him, go fight somebody else, strip them of their weapons, kill somebody else. Don't, because I'm going to kill you. Joab knows his abilities. And when Ashiel gets too close, Joab just basically stabs him with the blunt end of the spear. And it goes through his stomach and out his back. Joab has to be strong. He has to be a really good warrior to use the blunt end of the spear. He has a good grip on his spear. And he kills Ashiel. In battle, that's fair. Ashiel was trying to kill him. They didn't stand face to face and fight. They're running, but Joab uses a trick and kills him. And that's the essence of this. But it has long-term consequences. And we'll get to that in just a minute. It also is God's purpose because he needs Joab to help bring the rest of Israel to David. It would have been a long and bloody conflict. A lot more people would have died if Joab had not lived. It was God's will that Joab brings people back to Israel. This is how the peaceful transfer of power is going to happen. But it then affects, or Abner, rather, is the one that's going to bring Israel back to David and be the peaceful transfer of power. Verse 24, but Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and the sun was setting. They came to the hill of Ammah near Giah on the way to the wasteland of Gibeon. And there the men of Benjamin rallied behind Abner. They formed themselves into a group and took their stand on the top of a hill. So it's getting dark, it's evening, and Abner finally gets his men with him, and they get a defendable spot. It's a hill. It's on the edge of the wasteland. It's the edge of civilized society. They can run off into the dark, into the wasteland, and possibly get away. But they take this stand on the hill, and they form up, and it gets them to form into a group. David's men apparently have been better organized and staying in a group the whole time. That's part of why they won. Abner finally gets his men to stay together in a group and face the group that's coming at them from the top of the hill. They have the high ground advantage, and he's going to make a stand. It's time to quit running. It's time to make a stand. If they win, they win. If they lose, they lose. But at least they're going to have a fair shot at it. Verse 26, Abner said to Joab, must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their brothers? Joab answered, as surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, the men would have continued to pursue their brothers till morning. So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the men came to a halt. They no longer pursued Israel, nor did they fight anymore. So Abner, when he has a strong defensive position and finally can talk to Joab instead of start hand-to-hand combat, he basically asks for a ceasefire. That's our current word. And obviously they're not firing at each other's hand-to-hand combat. There were some archers, there were some spear throwers, javelin throwers, there were some slingers, and things like that. But apparently the two groups there are mainly swordsmen. And they're going to be fighting hand-to-hand with swords. And so he's asking, how long was this going to happen? How long are you going to chase? And Abner convinces Joab it's time to stop. For one thing, everybody's tired. They've been fighting all day. They've been running all day. They've been swinging their weapons all day. And hand-to-hand combat's rough. And here, everybody's run. And they've run a significant distance. And Joab knows that attacking uphill in the dark is just going to be brutal. It's time to call the truce. And we'll see where tomorrow leads. But as long as people were running, he was not going to call off the chase. They were going to chase till morning. That's very often how you actually won the battle when the psychology changed and one side started running. You chased them and you killed and you killed and you killed until there was nobody left running. And, you know, that made a major impact on the losers, and the winners very often had very little risk as they chased down and killed that way. And it made the countries reconsider because one side didn't have much of an army left and the other had their standing army and had won. And so, that was a fairly standard battle tactic. Very often, though, at dusk or shortly after dark, the pursuit would be broken off because running in the dark is dangerous, particularly if you're carrying weapons, sharp blades and spears and bow and arrows and stuff. You get tired. You're already tired. You've been doing it this whole time. But Joab knew he had a serious advantage and he planned to do it all night. He thought his men were pumped up enough to do it. And because Abner asked, he broke it off. He sounded the trumpet and they retreated. Verse 29. All that night, Abner and his men marched through the Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, continuing through the whole Bithron, and came to Mahanaim. Then Joab returned from pursuing Abner and assembled all his men. Besides Asahel, 19 of David's men were found missing, but David's men had killed 360 Benjamites who were with Abner. They took Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb at Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men marched all night and arrived at Hebron by daybreak. So we have the after-battle effects of these two armies. The armies of Ishbosheth, after the ceasefire, they march through the Jordan Valley, that's the Arabah, and they cross the Jordan and they go back home to where Ishbosheth rules. And they've been defeated in battle. They've lost 360 men. They only killed 20 men, 19 plus Asahel. Joab killed one. And they've been soundly defeated. This is a very lopsided victory. And they're running home with their tail tucked between their legs. David's men, they have time to count the dead from both sides, and they bury Asahel, and then they march all night and go back to Hebron. So the battle is in Benjamite territory, but nobody is ruling Benjamite territory at this point in time. Both armies leave. They haven't, in one sense, conquered any territory. They've just had a battle in which there was a victory, and David's men won. And it's a very lopsided death toll. These armies were not huge. David may have come out with just 600 men, the same 600 men he's been leading in battle for a few years now. Ishbosheth and Abner, son of Ner, they should have had a much larger army than that. But losing 360 men, even if it's, say, a tenth of their army, it's a significant shock. Particularly if they were coming up against a much smaller force. And now they've already each lost 12. That was before the battle, the expeditionary battle, before the battle. So, those 24 were lost and they're not counted in these. Obviously, David, I would think they would have said, we lost 7 more if they counted the 12 in the 19. And so they break off and they each go back to the cities they're ruling from. Chapter 3, verse 1. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His first one born was Amnon, the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second, Gilead, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephaniah, the son of Abital. And the sixth, Ithream, the son of David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. So we get with David in Hebron, he marries other women. The first two sons were born to the two wives that he had with him in Ziklag. And they each have a son in order that they married David. So Absalom is David's firstborn son of his second wife. Saul's daughter does not bear many children. And I'm jumping ahead of the story there, but we'll get to that later. And then Abigail bears him a son. Absalom is the thirdborn son, and his mother is the daughter of a king in a foreign country. So David has made a political alliance with this other country and married one of the king's daughters. Fairly common in that time. It was something that Moses had commanded the Israelite kings not to do. It actually does not cause David a whole lot of damage other than Absalom becomes rebellious and causes David a lot of grief. But that story comes a little later. We'll get to it. But the thing is, it sets a precedent. And Solomon, when David's son, becomes king, he goes marries lots of foreign women, and it turns his heart against God. It didn't turn David's heart against God, but it set a precedent that lets Solomon, the guy that builds the temple, quit worshiping Yahweh. As God said that you would if you went and married foreign women. Some of these other women are just mothers of his sons, and apparently may not have been formally married to him, may have been concubines or one-night stands. We have no knowledge. The sixth one, that mother is acknowledged as a wife. So David is acting like the kind of self-imposed potentates that were common in the Middle East. Marry a bunch of women, you have power, and you express it with your sexual acumen, and you have children by a bunch of women, and he has a son by each of them, which the community would have viewed that he is therefore very virile, and he's strong, and he's a good leader, and because he didn't have daughters, he had sons. Yeah, he has no control over that. God has control over that. God's building him up in the public's eyes, that he's a man that has sons. But, he's marrying a bunch of women, which is something that Moses said the king should not do. And he's marrying foreign women. And we get the implied that he may not have even been marrying all these. He may have just been having affairs with some of them. But he had a son. So he has to acknowledge the relationship. He's, living his equal best life. He's not necessarily a really moral man. He's a man that consults God. We've seen that he consults the priest. He asks the questions. He thinks it's good to leave Philistia, and he wants to go back to Judah. But he doesn't just say to his men, "Hey men, let's go home." He brings in the priest and asks, and he's willing to listen to the answers. And probably got the message from God to go to Hebron, and that was probably not where he wanted to go. He probably wanted to go back to Bethlehem. If he had brought his 600 men with him, he probably, all on his own, he probably would have gone to Bethlehem, where his family was. But no, he brings them to Hebron, the most important city, the biggest city in Judah, and he sets up his rule there. And his family is not the ones leading Israel, leading Judah. He has this administration that has people from all over Israel, and they're leading Judah. And he has, when we get to the names of these men, they're from all over the place. And some of them aren't Israelites. They're from other countries. But they're loyal to Yahweh, they're loyal to David, and they're good soldiers. So David ends up ruling there in Hebron, and he's ruling in enough peace he can take on relations with women, and he has 6 sons there in 7.5 years. He's got a complicated family life if he has 6 women living in the household with him. Even if it's just the 4 that are acknowledged as wives living with him, he has a complicated life. I know that being married to Frankie and having 2 daughters in the house was a complicated mix. And that's fairly simple because my daughters respected my wife, their mother. And I still had complications having 3 women in my household. I can't imagine 4 or 6 women in my household that are all my wives. That's got to be not something I would want to do. And he somehow manages enough that he gets all of them pregnant and has sons. And they're all raising their own sons. And David is not actually, well, he's being a father to them, but he's also being king. And that doesn't leave him a lot of time to be a father. He has advisors and different people, but the women are left to raise the children. That's probably how this works. This is how this works in most cases. In most cases in the Middle East, we have some evidence later that the mother affects who the prince that becomes king becomes. And so very often you look at who the mother was and how the king was, and they didn't follow their dads, they followed their mother. They ruled like their mother would have ruled if she had been able to rule the country. And so if he married a godly woman, he had a godly son that was a godly leader. If he married for somebody else for some other reason that was ungodly, he ended up with an ungodly king following him. Strong evidence that there's the women are raising the princes, not the father, because he's too busy being king to be a father. That's just the way that was. We have evidence from some of the surrounding countries that was the way it was. People just didn't conceive that the king should be father to his sons. Yeah, maybe if you were a farmer on the field and you owned your own land, you'd be a father to your children. But you might actually spend a lot more time farming and have free-range children, the term now. David took that kind of one step further. They weren't free range in the sense that they could go run the countryside. They had to stay in town with him, but their mothers were the parent. And there are consequences to the kingship of Israel all the way to the captivity into Babylon from that. David sets that precedent. Saul apparently had been a better father in one sense. Jonathan knew him and was good friends with him. And David points that out. But David does not take that example from Saul and be an active, involved father. And it becomes the way the kings of Israel and Judah act, and that's a detriment to the country. David may have been a man after God's own heart, but he was not perfect. And we can see evidence of that even in Hebrew. Holy Father, help us to be men and women that obey you and follow you, that we will seek you out like David did. But also help us to study your word and to live the life that you want us to live. To be active parents, to be active leaders, to be witnesses for you, to be honest workers. All the other things you've said in Scripture, that we would be good examples to our families, to our friends, to our neighbors, our co-workers, and others that know us. That we would be better at living the way you say to live than David was. Yes, he was a man after your heart, but you forgave him a whole lot. Even though he set bad precedent, he still was faithful to you. And you forgave him because he was the man for that hour. I feel in my heart that the hour grows late, that you are returning soon. We must be our best for you. Have us to be faithful witnesses. Have us to not turn to the side, the left or right, like Ashiel. That we see our task and pursue it, even if it kills us. Lord, have us be that kind of faithful to you. That we don't do our own thing, but we do your thing. In your holy name, amen. I am Frank Reich. I'm Associate Pastor of Family Ministry at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church. I've been your host. I hope to see you Wednesday at church. This has been recorded on Monday, January 30th, 2023. It's been a good day for me. Did a lot of walking. Finished my walking area. The dogs are tired right now. The sleet has started. I've seen a little bit of snow. We got the few supplies we didn't have that we needed, and so we're able to sit tight. Tomorrow will be, if the weather forecast is anywhere near accurate, it'll be a nasty day. My boss has already called me and has arranged professional transportation for me to go to work. I'm going to be one of 3 people that are coming in. Our group of 8 can't handle. It doesn't have to come in. And in a bad weather day, we shift to a reduced workload and get the essentials done. And after the bad weather, we can come back in and pick up the slack. But I'm going to be one of those people doing the essentials. It will be an interesting day. I've done this several times because I'm one of the people that lives closest and it's easiest to get me. I live near one of the people that brings people in. It's one of the professional drivers that has to drive in it regardless and has gotten really good at it. And I will be working tomorrow and Wednesday. I will make a decision whether we meet in person on Wednesday or not on Wednesday. If I choose not to, I hope to see you Sunday. Oscar has finished the worst case scenarios sermon series, and it was really good. I liked it. He is doing a really good job. I'm looking forward to the one that he has coming up. It's going to be a good series too. He's doing a good job. You need to be listening to him. If you can't listen to him, at least watch the video and listen to him there. You have a blessed week. I hope to see you at church. I hope that we can meet on Wednesday. I hope we can meet on Sunday. I expect to be able to meet on Sunday. Pray for all of our staff. Pray for Oscar. Pray for Bill. Pray for Dale. Pray for me. Pray for Becky. That we would be pure. We would be holy. We would be wise. We would be seeking God's face and leading you to do that too. Have a blessed week.